One physiological response important for humans is happiness. That's triggered by a neurotransmitter chemical in the brain that's released with some stimulus, either naturally or unnaturally. Natural stimuli include getting a good grade in Chem 9, or just doing anything that you think is pleasurable, like spending time with friends. There's also semi-natural stimuli, like smoking, drinking, gambling, or social media. Those will also trigger that feel-good response. Then there's unnatural stimuli, which are drugs. Humans make an effort to seek this feel-good response, and we've learned that seeking out either semi-naturally or unnaturally the feel-good response can lead to addiction because higher and higher amounts are required to get that same feel-good response. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain, a structure that is similar to epinephrine. There's a benzene ring and then hydrocarbon chain off of it with an amine group. This dopamine plays many important roles in the brain and in the body. When dopamine is released in the brain, physiological responses include reward-motivated behavior, like pleasure and euphoria, and that's experienced by these types of drugs unnaturally. There's also executive functions that are controlled by a dopamine pathway. So emotion and motivation also can be affected by these drugs. Motor functions are also affected by dopamine, and that's in the body. That dopamine will block pain. It's an addictive combination that you have rewards like pleasure and euphoria in combination with the blocking of pain. And that's why humans are constantly seeking out these types of drugs and leading to addiction. Now here's the structure of serotonin. So serotonin is similar to the structure of dopamine. They both have a benzene ring and an amine group. So here's the benzene ring and the amine group. There's 2 alcohol groups on the benzene ring and 1 alcohol group on the serotonin. Both dopamine and serotonin lead to a feel-good response, but serotonin is a longer-term feel-good response. And this is long-term happiness compared to short-term happiness and be brought on by more natural types of stimulants. Opiates are derived from opium. So this is the opium plant, and they can be natural, synthetic, or semi-synthetic. So natural opium comes from poppy seeds in here, and these were historically used even before written history, so before 4000 BC or so, used as a narcotic and painkiller. Opioids are synthetic or semi-synthetic, and those are opioid drugs, and these are examples: morphine, heroin, fentanyl, methadone. What they all have in common is this pharmacophore, this active site, is similar in all of these structures. Though they look complicated, all of these have a benzene ring and then an amine group. Interestingly, opioids are also naturally produced in your body and will bind to an opiate receptor and release the dopamine in your brain. These unnatural opiate drugs take advantage of the natural opioid receptors and the natural dopamine pathways. It's overstimulation of the dopamine pathways that happens in drug abuse and drug addiction. It basically requires higher amounts over time to achieve the same feeling, the same feel-good feeling when the unnatural pathways using drugs are taken. Dopamine, being short-term happiness, is usually felt in the body, and too much can lead to addiction. Serotonin, on the other hand, is long-term happiness and is usually felt in the brain, and little of it, however, can lead to depression. These opioid drugs, they have the pharmacophore, and they differ by slight variations in structure, which improve binding and also a physiological response. For example, heroin is more potent, so perhaps it has better binding or better function because some of these functional groups are different. Methadone is an example of, similar to an antihistamine, this can fit into the opiate receptor and block the physiological response or have less of the physiological response, which allows for treatment